right, Doom v. Vamus v. Vamos Epicurians. This is the Marvel Epic Collection Podcast One-Shot Edition. I'm your host, Nick Smith, and I'm joined by...
Stojr from Stojr Shelf. How's it going, Nick?
I'm doing well, particularly since we are participating in Kurtis Findlay's Epic Marvel Podcast Reading Club, and this one-shot is going to be our brief thoughts on today's issue, which is X Men number 137, The Fate of the Phoenix, the titular issue for this epic volume, right? Alright, so the usual introduction crawl is replaced with a statement that this issue is the 13th anniversary of the X-Men coming out, so I thought that was a fun little change that happened there. Let's see, Jean and the X-Men have been transported aboard the Shi'ar Imperial ship, and Jean is to be put to death for the genocide of Dabari. However, since Charles Xavier spent time with the Shi'ar, he is aware of a trial by combat system, or custom that they have that cannot be refused, and so he claims it. The X-Men thus prepare to fight the Imperial Guard, and they do so in the blue sector of the moon. Well, the Imperial Guard picks off the X-Men one by one, until only Cyclops and Phoenix remain, but as Cyclops was threatened, the Phoenix Force took over Jean, and Xavier called upon the X-Men to turn on Jean for the sake of humanity. Well, after weakening Jean a bit, she eventually turns some weapons that were left on the moon to herself, and she takes her own life. All right, Stojr, what are your thoughts?
So, anytime you're going to start off with the Watcher introducing what's going on, shit's about to go down, so to speak, as the kids say. I love the double-page splash page on page 2 and 3. It really evokes the splash pages that we had for the Imperial Guard. It just makes you remember that. It doesn't look the same. It's not laid out the same, but just the idea of hey, there's a whole lot of people here. We're in a room with with space people and different races and things like that. It really opens things up very quickly. You get a crash course in intergalactic politics with the Skrulls and the Kree not liking each other, but kind of working together for this particular problem. I thought that's really interesting. And each little vignette of each of the X-Men kind of preparing for what's going on, you almost get a sense of, while they're all there for Jean and they're all willing to defend it, they're not all equally there for her, right? Some of them are what the heck did I just get pulled into? She killed a planet. I don't know if I should do this, type of thought process here. But you're going to get, Beast and Angel reunited with the rest of the X-Men, not just for a cameo, but to actual battle it out. Same thing with seeing Wolverine. You're getting a little bit more of the inner workings of Wolverine in here, and this is going to kind of continue. So we saw before him fighting some people, and being sort of stealthy and infiltrating the inner circle of the Hellfire Club alone. And now here we get him kind of meditating naked, in a dark room, which is funny and all, just because, he's this big hairy furball. But there's more to him than just, this rage monster, right? He's sitting there doing some things, and this is really going to play off in a couple volumes of X-Men as we sort of uncover all of the Japanese elements of Logan and his name, which is not revealed yet. Spoilers. If anybody's reading or listening to this podcast and don't know Wolverine's Logan, I'm not sure, that you should be here. But little spoilers from time to time. No, actually, because we read ahead when we get to the Wendigo issue. That's the first time. Well, so if it's revealed, the X-Men don't know it.
Yes,
because Nightcrawler learned his name in the Wendigo issue.
Yeah, it's been revealed to us, not to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we might know it, but they don't. And just the way that the X-Men really kind of go through this in battle, but are really just, no match for what's going to happen here. And ultimately, it's whittled down to Jean sacrificing herself and ultimately perishing. And, you're not really going to know if that's real. Hey, there's no body, right? There's just a pile of ash. But, when you have the Watcher bookending a book and the cover to the next book with Cyclops leaving, it feels pretty real, and this sticks for a while in the comics. So, Claremont and Byrne, kill one of the original X-Men after 13 years, as you said. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think this is also a time where death felt more permanent in comics. It's the joke these days that there is no permanent death in comic books. And heck, I didn't read the Krakoa thing, but wasn't that actually a part of it, that they could defy death because Krakoa could revive them or something like that?
Yeah, they basically had a process to revive themselves where they took a like a mental backup of your brain at certain points in time, like before you went on a mission. So if you died on the mission, they would just bring you back, and it's like a save point. And they used like five different mutant powers to combined.
Mm-hmm.
Proteus being one of them, actually, if I remember correctly. It was like Gold Balls, Proteus, Hope, and I forget the other two. And then they would basically be able to rehatch you during that Krakoa era, which was, can sound very, get out of jail free cardy, but it ultimately had some interesting storytelling elements with, well, what do you do with like multiple Wolverine bodies out there and all that adamantium? What do you do with, you know, there's somebody that dies, but well, they revive them, but they're not actually dead. There's somebody that dies off world in this other spot where they try and revive them, and they can't revive them back to their memories. Like it doesn't work right, so that person's permanently changed. So yeah, it's not a perfect thing, like having the get out of jail free card or the save points, but they had some interesting storytelling elements with it. I'll say.
It's kind of like Theseus's mutants, right? Just
Yep.
replace the parts. um, but yeah, death feels more permanent at this point. So to kill off Jean Grey certainly seems like a big thing, and comic storytelling just doesn't get any better than this. I think we get this epic fight, massive stakes at play, some truly emotional scenes between Cyclops and Phoenix, and also, as you say, the various X-Men weighing whether they should be helping Jean or not. It truly is a moral quandary, right? She has killed an entire planet, an entire species. So yeah, how do you defend that? Which, of course, there's arguments if she wasn't in her right mind, she's not to blame, but in some ways she is. Anyway, also, to your point, having the watcher give a recap of the story is not only a good way of summing up the events for a new reader, but it also lends weight to the importance of this story. That what is happening is truly worth the watcher's attention in his remarks. And I don't think that trope has been played enough at this phase in comics to where it hasn't worn its welcome, whereas I think maybe in later years it kind of does. Adding to that weight, let's see, I have a note on page 154. Let me see if I can find that in the comic viewer. You had mentioned this too, Stojr. Yeah, 154. Let me get that on the comic viewer. Yeah, we have both the Kree and the Skrulls here, and they are giving their efforts. They're working together with the Shi'ar, essentially, for figuring out how to defeat the Phoenix. So having both a Kree and a Skrull involved in this violent battle, of course, lends weight to just how important this is, that these two deadly enemies can come together, and sure, they're not going to like one another, they're still going to be rude to one another, but they agree they've got to get rid of the Phoenix. It again lays super importance and weight to this. I think my only quibble with this issue is that there are times when the characters have to tell us what is happening and it's not so obvious from the art. So, for example, we're told that what finally unleashes the Phoenix was seeing Scott go down, but at least to my memory, we don't actually see Scott get injured, right? That's told us in the caption. So that I think is something that might have been handled better. And then finally, Scott describes how and why Jean took her own life in a word dump. So I don't know. I think maybe that would have been better if we had some build up in Jean's head and we saw her thinking of it, or to give that suspense, maybe there was a psychic delayed message from Jean to Scott or something like that. But to have Cyclops have this soliloquy where he just kind of explains what happens, I think was a little bit of a letdown. But having said that, I really thought the summation at the end between the Recorder and the Watcher was a brilliant way to finish this. And I'm gonna go ahead on the comic reader here. I'm gonna pull up that last page. Let's see. Here we go. The Watcher's final statements really kind of puts a definitive end to this storyline in a beautiful way. I've got it too small on the comic screen to read it, but let's see if I can actually find that in my physical book here. It's very Star Trek-y, right? It's very much this is the beautiful thing about humans. Maybe this is too much to. Well, I'll just read that final balloon. Jean Grey could have lived to become a god, but it was more important to her that she die a human, right? If you allow yourself to get a little, I don't know, cheesy and emotional, it hits, right? It's like, oh, this is big, and Claremont handles it so well here that, yeah, it's just great.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, to your point about like some of the narration and things like that, I think there are times where Claremont falls into a trap of having his characters kind of over explain even in their own heads. I think I made a comment about that with Proteus, where he's like, like, who are you talking to, right? And that pops up from time to time. So I think that's just, a little bit of a challenge. I mean, and I rattled through some of the reasons why this issue is important, right? Being bookended and why it feels more real and all of that. The other reason is this is a double-sized issue, which is not. I mean, this isn't the 150th issue. This isn't, an anniversary issue. This is just issue 137, right? And they said 13 years ago, but 13 isn't an anniversary people generally celebrate. If I would have a quibble with anything, it might be that stupid Marvel comic could be worth $2,500 thing on the cover.
Yes.
That and those bicycle ads from the 80s drive me crazy.
Oh, yes, they're so
because
terrible.
They just take up so much real estate. And it just, I'm sure it would have been cool at the time, but I wish that they just, I don't know. I wish they weren't there.
Yeah, as a kid, that's a selling thing, right? Oh, it's a story, and I could win money or a bike or whatever. Yeah. Well,
and the next one has the Toys R Us shopping spree one on the next issue, right? So it's like, exit Cyclops, who everyone's sad, and we have a funeral, but you can win a Toys R Us shopping spree. But yeah, I mean those are all minor quibbles. I mean, this is peak X Men, frankly.
Yep.
So.
I am going to give a no prize award here. All right, here we go. Contender for Best Comic Story Award goes to the Dark Phoenix Saga for all the reasons that we've mentioned the past 3 issues. Now, I am hesitant to definitively say that this is the best story ever, but boy, does this have to rank and deserve to be in consideration for one of the best comic stories ever. I'm sure there are others out there. I mean, I know The Watchmen is held in high regard, but boy, is this just hits. This is so good.
I mean, the story's so good that they tried to make 2 X-Men movies about it.
Oh, what was the second one? I remember the third of the original cast.
The third of the original, and there was the one with what's it, Sophie Turner, played Jean Grey. The girl from Game of Thrones. I think it's Sophie Turner. I think it's actually called Dark Phoenix, if I remember correctly. It was like
Was it
so
rewind?
With the X-Men? Yeah, so the X-Men had the first 3, and then they had the one where they went back in time and had like the First Class or whatever it was called.
Right.
And then they did the Days of Future Past, which kind of mixed them. And then they had, I guess there was Apocalypse was the next one, where they followed the younger generation but older. And then there was after that it was it must have been this one. It must have been Dark Phoenix. I think this was probably the last one that they made. I think
maybe
unless the Apocalypse one. I may have them flipped.
I may have.
They weren't
point.
good. They didn't do them justice, to be honest with you. But they did try and have. They did a better job with the Sophie. I think it's Sophie Turner with that version than the X-Men 3. So
okay. Any other final thoughts then, Stojr?
No, this is great stuff. This is what we've all been here for.
Right. And of course the question is, where do you go from here, right? Well, I guess we'll find out next time. So again, if you guys have enjoyed our thoughts, follow us on YouTube. We're going to read, rate, and review a full Epic Collection trade paperback once a month, and we're going to have these daily one-shots as the Epic Marvel Podcast Reading Club soldiers on. All right, so with that in mind, we'll see you guys again tomorrow. Bye.